Dopamine swipe, dopamine swipe. Followers, likes, double tap. Now they control your life.
What is going on, beautiful people? Welcome back to the 817 podcast, where we talk about the lovely city of Fort Worth, Texas. We get into politics, business, culture, news. If it impacts you as a Fort Worthian, we discuss it. I'm here with my co-host, Ann Zeta. We are doing this Wednesday nights because both you and I are not moving. we are.
You better take that back because that is what people think.
No. We are flying to California for two separate reasons, but I'm glad you're able to leave. You're leaving tomorrow?
Yes.
Cool. Family?
Yep. Going to see my kids.
Awesome. Me and my wife are going to San Francisco. We have our little wedding anniversary, so we're going to San Francisco. Yeah. Hanging out, going to a concert. It's going to be nice, good weather. We're excited. But I find it funny that we both are going to California the same weekend that this is titled Land of the Free for All. Fort Worth wants no rules. As you guys know, we do 3 short stories, 1 big story.
You might not know that because we haven't done it in a while.
That is true. We had 3 interviews, which have been incredible.
Yeah.
All 3
I
were
think it was
amazing.
the right call to do that. But
yes.
We definitely got away from keeping up with the short stories and the big stories and, paying homage to all the reporters out there doing all the hard work.
Yes, absolutely. And we're going to be bringing them to you this week. So buckle in. Obviously, we want to talk to you guys today because we're doing it on Wednesday because we don't want to skip because we got so much to talk about. So the first one is clearly we have Angelica Ramsey, the superintendent, has put in her resignation letter and it was approved by the board. This is all started, right? I mean, I'm not saying it's connected, but at the end of last month, Fort Worth Mayor Maddie Parker walked into school board meeting and told board members that the city's biggest school district was falling behind. And nearly a month later, Fort Worth ISD superintendent resigned from her posts. Now, there's some debate on if that was the reason and what's going on. She will be on payroll until August. Her contract, her salary is $335,000 a year.
Actually, I think she's going to be the superintendent through August. She's going to be on the payroll through next year. It was 2025.
Whoa. Okay,
Yeah.
because I'm saying the district school board voted Tuesday evening to accept Ramsey's resignation from the superintendent position, effective October 1st. She'll remain on the district's payroll until August. Although it's unclear what capacity she'll be working in under
August
her
of
contract.
2025, because we're already past August of 2024.
Yes. What did I say?
You said August, but we're in September. So it's August of 2025 that she will remain on the payroll.
Yeah.
That's, I think,
They're
her
finishing out the
contract
school
is
year, too.
not up. They're going to have an interim. They do
Yes.
speak to hiring an interim. So.
Who's the same interim who was there when
Did they already pick the interim?
Yes.
Oh, I missed that.
The interim superintendent will be Deputy Superintendent Karen Molinar. She previously served before Ramsey was hired. So obviously, we had on Ale,
Cheka.
who really did a great interview, kind of giving the lens from a teacher perspective, and shout out to her to continue to advocate for the profession and what's right for students and staff. She's been in a couple other stories. And really, I mean, this has kind of happened relatively quickly and people are sharing their statements. Maddie Parker shared her letter about we deserve a transformative school district that sets the bar in the country and is able to get kids ready for their futures. Then you also have other people talking about the need for our literacy rates to go higher. You're having institutional players really getting involved with literacy. There's even like a big event coming up that's going to be sold out around how reading is a civil right. So there's just a ton of people in this space passionate about making Fort Worth's education better. And I know you know a lot of teachers. I know you actually kind of ran into a couple school board members as well. What do you just figure out? What do you believe and kind of feel is the overall tone about all of this post resignation?
Well, I think in the beginning when they were first speaking about it, evaluating her performance, receiving the letter from the mayor and the other signatories of that letter, everybody was saying that this is not going to be solved by just the firing of one person. So I don't even know if anybody was calling. Well, some people were, but I don't necessarily. The mayor, I think, was saying that they weren't necessarily calling for her to be fired. They wanted the school district just to do something. That seems to come up a lot. Do something. Yeah. And So I think that the takeaway and what people are now saying in the multitude of articles that have come out is that it's not going to just be a miracle that you flip the switch of replacing this one person and everything is solved. And as we were discussing all of these articles and trying to figure out, what people were thinking and what we think, we both kind of came to the conclusion that everybody kind of needs to look in the mirror and ask themselves, what role did we play in not supporting our local school district to the amount necessary in order for it to be more successful than it has been?
Yeah, and I mean, Angelica Ramsey's was only there for 2 years, and as someone who works in schools, I mean, to give you an example how bad schools are at moving quickly, we had the historical infusion of cash in public schools called ESSER funds. ESSER funds needed to be spent at a certain time. I think I want to say it was September 30th. And there are school districts across the country who didn't even spend all the money, so they had to pay it back. So you had to it was money from the federal government that was used for the pandemic, and the incompetence or slowness of school districts couldn't even figure out how to spend those dollars. I know districts who only spent 36% of those dollars, 64% of those dollars. And so, my whole take about I am never going to say Angelica Ramsey was a bad superintendent because that's not my space. I don't know enough about what it takes to be a good superintendent, because I admire anyone who will get into the octagon or the arena and be the gladiator to do such a crazy task, because it can't just be Superintendent Angelica Ramsey's issue. Fort Worth ISD is starting to feel like the Detroit Lions. Now, I know Ann Zeta knows nothing about sports.
Except for my husband is a huge Lions fan, and he will be forever, even though they continually lose.
Yes, exactly. And now they're good, and they got this former coach who was a player for the Lions, and now they're winning games. But historically, for decades, no matter what coach you put in there, they didn't do good. And I start to question that for us, Fort Worth. Is there, this idea that, even Maddie Parker talked about, we'll find that transformative leader that's going to save the day, who's going to come in here and do this. But that's why I think you're right, that we all have to look in the mirror, because what is it about us what is it about how we hold Fort Worth ISD accountable? How much does them constantly be in the news, how we talk about them in the news? How do we point fingers at them? How much pressure are they constantly in? And there was even talks about Fort Worth culture. And Betsy Price said how Angelica Ramsey's
didn't understand Fort Worth's
culture. And so I'm saying, well, maybe that's the problem. And I'm not saying I know where to fix it, but we have to start accepting that this isn't a superintendent problem. This is a Fort Worth cultural problem. And we all have to look in our mirror and say, what does being for an urban public school district look like? And what is my job as a community member, a parent, a student, a faculty member,
a business owner
to this situation? Because we can also look at, we have had 2 mayors, the one we currently have and the one before. They were quote unquote education mayors, right? Reading was the big one for Betsy Price. Mayor Maddie Parker had 2 and through and the college matriculation, but also was advocate for reading. And so it can't just be down to pointing at one person.
I would say the people that I wouldn't be pointing at as failing would be the teachers.
Yep, there you go.
I think that in all of these cases, when we have opportunities to ask how it should be done right, they haven't been getting enough of a say.
Yeah.
And to that point, I shared with you this event that's coming up is reading a civil right. And if you look at who's speaking on that panel, there aren't any teachers or professors or scholars on that panel.
Yeah.
So I think we continue to maybe miss the ball.
Yeah.
For a sports analogy.
Yeah. And that's happened several times. I remember there was a panel at that theater off of Camp Bowie, I believe, and it was a T3 event. And there was an article that we talked about where it was Maddie, a couple other
nonprofit
leaders talking about how we need to do better in education, but no one actually in classrooms. And yeah, and so like this one's always tough for me because weirdly, I've also been wondering because I live in schools. I genuinely live in schools. I was in Alabama all last week. Before there, I was in Lancaster ISD, which is 45 minutes from here. I've been to tons of schools. I mean, I'm talking about I've been to schools where half the kids are failing. 700 absences already. We're 6 weeks in. I've been all over this place. And we are really failing black and brown kids and specifically black students. And I don't know how we can continue to, just realize there is a systemic issue to all of this. And that we really have to really think about how we look at our resources and how do we get our kids to succeed. Because there's so much opportunity in America, but it doesn't seem like our domestic supply, using a business term, of our students get the privilege to live on that stack of wealth. You're seeing kids with visas coming from India, coming from Asia, going to higher ed institutions and getting these jobs, right? 60 of our Fortune 500 CEOs are Indian, Asian Americans. They're 1.5% of our population, right? Black CEOs in the Fortune 500, 8, right? 13% of our population, right? We need to start really looking at the past of Fort Worth and then also the perception of public school in Fort Worth. I'm tired of walking into a restaurant and people's first questions are, where do you live? And where do your kids go to school? And it's basically a big question of luxury. And, I hear that's getting better. I heard that area is getting better. Every time I tell people I live in Meadowbrook, they're like, I heard that area is getting better. I'm like, what are you trying to say? Like, you will now live over here now? Or what's that mean? Like, so it's like, I just think there's so much toxic view of Fort Worth ISD when there's a lot of great work happening, as you said, at the teacher-student level.
Yeah, and the teachers have been saying, singing the praises of the students and the parents that they get to work with, and have said that, it's not a lack of fabulous students. They have great students, and they think they have great potential. They're just so loaded down with all this administrative stuff and all this, data-driven testing. It seems like that they're not able to do their jobs.
And it also goes to, why are we writing letters to the people in the arena when we should also, like we said, write letters to the governor, to our judge, our commissioners, about the property tax situation with TAD that's going to impact funding public schools. So that's the thing, is like, it feels a little bit of people sitting in the arena, watching people in the audience, watching the people in the arena with their fancy stuff on and not have to really get their hands dirty in the problem, and then saying, we got to do better, and then can just be punitive rather than be helpful. So that's the unfortunate situation we're in today. We'll see what kind of superintendent we can find. Usually you get 5 years, and Helica Ramsey only got 2. So we're going to move into short story number 2.
So short story number 2 is a Fort Worth Report article entitled "Fort Worth's New LGBTQ Advisory Committee Sparks Backlash, Support from City Council." So I don't know if we did speak about this previously, because I think that this story all came out since the last time we had a regular pod where we talked about articles. But there was an article that spoke to the fact that the City of Fort Worth's Human Relations Commission had taken a step to put together a committee, a subcommittee, an advisory committee on LGBTQ issues. And the Human Relations Commission is made up of commissioners appointed by all of the council members and the mayor. And they have another subcommittee under their umbrella that speaks to persons with disabilities. And I believe that there are city staff that help that commission run, just like all the boards and commissions that the city has. But a couple of council members, when they saw the article related to the fact that this committee, this subcommittee had been formed, went to social media shared the article and expressed alarm that they had not been informed that this subcommittee was being formed by the Human Relations Commission, and indicated that in their opinion that this was rogue staff pushing their own personal agendas and politics. And, I have some personal experience with the Human Relations Commission, and they have the ability to bring forward issues in the community that they think are relevant to their purview and express an opinion on that and write letters to influence policy that the city council might make. And specifically, when I was on council, we were looking at the lawsuit that was a statewide lawsuit against SB4, which was a bill that many people found discriminatory against Hispanic community members because it was kind of a show me your papers law. And it was getting local law enforcement involved in immigration issues. And there were several council members that thought that we should join the statewide lawsuit. And the Human Relations Commission at that time had a meeting, and they wrote a letter encouraging the city council to join that lawsuit. And that was the commission itself. It was not, driven by staff or anything. So I don't know what's going on behind the scenes on this issue, but I think to point to staff and say that this is something that they're doing is incorrect.
Because both Councilman Blaylock and Councilwoman Hill has someone on that human relation that they appointed.
Yes.
So, yeah. But the overall, the overall that this has become such the thing that is splintering the collaboration between our city council team in 2024 for the 12th largest city is just depressing.
It really is. I mean, we went into this type of an issue previously back when the raid on the Rainbow Lounge happened, and it was very clear to all involved at that time that there needed to be some work done, and some efforts were put into police and LGBTQ relations. And that has been an ongoing effort that Councilman Joel Burns started. And when I was in office, I carried on with that. We expanded that relationship building to include the fire department, and community members have continued to have those conversations to make sure that those relationships continue to be good. Having this type of a committee to address these types of issues, I think clearly this stuff became clear that it was an important thing to talk about because of several things that have come up that seemed like less than welcoming to our LGBTQ community members. The issues with, and we're going to talk about this in the big story, but the changes to who can rent community center facilities, and the fact that a group that wanted to talk about some things that were very anti-LGBTQ were going to rent a community center. The fact that we had a pride badge in our reading challenge, summer reading challenge, and that was removed. The fact that we have had a pride proclamation for many, many years without any hubbub or dissent. And now we have council members who refuse to sign that proclamation. And we're no longer having citywide proclamations, is my understanding. There's now just, certificates of recognition from the mayor's office or individual council offices. So all of these things, for those of us who are allies to the LGBTQ community and for those who are in the LGBTQ community, seem like backsliding and attacks against their existence. And so that is quite concerning. Yes.
Yeah. And that you simply don't you're not even okay with the committee to help you understand more their needs and perspective. That's all this is. This isn't saying that you have to
accept people.
Yeah.
Anything.
It's just
these people are your constituents as well.
Yeah.
So it might be helpful.
And you would want to learn about that community, regardless what the population that needs more support or focus. So I don't know if you said this part, but there was a statement on that was signed by 4 council members. basically saying we stand for the human and civil rights of every Fort Worth resident, embracing our common belief in the mantra, in Fort Worth, y'all means all. Now, it's a longer letter, but it was signed by Jared Williams, Chris Nettles, Jeanette Martinez, and Elizabeth Beck. There is...
And I believe that was in response to what I was talking about first, and that was the 2 council members who expressed objection to the committee being formed. Yeah. And so they felt it necessary, and I agree. I appreciate their standing up. I think that the Fort Worth Report did reach out to some other council members, and according to Council Member Crane, he wasn't asked to sign, but he didn't say whether he would have been willing to had he been asked. I think it would have been helpful to ask everyone that weren't the 2 original council members who had the objection.
Yeah. So that left out Carlos, Gina, and Lauersdorf. So we do know that based off of the proclamation, Lauersdorf was one of the ones who said, I didn't know any of these organizations on the Pride Proclamation. Now we're recognizing these organizations that I had known. So who knows? But this to me is interesting because it just kind of talked about last week with Alex from Tarrant for Change about, are we more progressive as a council? Like, we were so proud that it got more diverse, it got younger, but then you just shared all the things that it feels like some areas are going backwards. And we're doing this infighting here that we're not able to address and talk about a lot of things that are happening around us that really need some serious discussions. But this is, I think there's talks around that they're trying to attack human relations as a whole. There's talks around town that DEI as a whole, that they're coming for all those parts. And so obviously those extremist views from the Tarrant GOP and a subset of conservatives trigger enough worry to some of our council members who operate in a purple city. Alrighty, so we're going to move into story number 3. Story number 3 has some updates around development. Obviously, Ann Zeta has walked every part of the city physically.
I don't think that's quite accurate.
Yeah, I know.
I did try to walk a marathon in my mayoral campaign, but it wasn't every street in the city.
Yes, but I know you have some updates about where we are at Northside. There was an article coming out about gentrification, and you just came out from another event in Evans, Rosedale.
I did. So there's an article in the Fort Worth Report called "How Can Fort Worth Reduce Gentrification Around Panther Island? Take Action Now," experts say. And I think we've touched on these efforts of looking at Northside, the community of Northside, from the perspective of Northside itself in the face of all of the redevelopment that's happening in the stockyards and the coming development that is happening in Panther Island. And the city took a really big step along with partners, actually the chamber, the Hispanic Chamber, alongside the historic Northside Main Street group in bringing ULI, Urban Land Institute, into town, experts from across the whole country. And they took an entire week meeting with community members, meeting with basically hundreds of people. And they all brought perspectives from the various places that they came from. And they had I can't remember the name of what they called it, like a workbook basically that was created by staff with the data and the stats and some engagement that was done up front before their arrival, and then continued to do engagement. And they had their final presentation of their proposals at a meeting at Arts de la Rosa. And some of the things that they are indicating need to happen are things that I'm really happy to see, because they're things that Community Design Fort Worth has been calling for quite some time. And one of those is cultural asset mapping. But basically, I think this is a great step, and it could be an excellent structure and scaffolding of efforts that can be replicated and used in other areas of the city. So not just to the benefit of Northside. So I was describing that over the past week, experts, including former Housing and Urban Development Secretary Henry Cisneros, came into town. They interviewed community members, and they delivered a report of recommendations to Fort Worth officials on how the area and its cultural identity could be maintained and also promote equitable development in any plans going forward. Those key recommendations were presented on September 20th at an event, and they engaged Northside residents, and we had meaningful conversation around all of that. And instead of looking to the community from the lens of Panther Island and how it could affect it, they were shifting the paradigm to see how the community can benefit from what is happening on Panther Island.
To navigate creating an island that's clearly going to create new people to show up into this area, I think for me, I think the challenge is like this is costing a lot of dollars. And to get a return, it's obviously we're going to need some type of economic piece. And unfortunately, that economic piece, they don't see the mathing if you're expecting that to be paid by the economic dollars of the locals. And so regardless how inclusive we bring locals, there still is this strategy around, like, I'm less fearful of gentrification and I'm more fear of like corporations and like how, you know, when I think of San Antonio's Riverwalk, right? Like nobody goes there because they had to bring in a lot of corporate restaurants like Dick's and all that stuff that really messed up a vibe that could have been really special because the architecture is beautiful. And so like my fear there is that, and my second fear is like the whole obsession of this feels a little like 20 million people show up to the stockyards. They make this kind of money for us. If we can get them to stay for another 45 minutes because they want to go down the streets, we can make X more dollar. And now we get the, like, it's almost their sequel to the main event of Cowtown and the stockyards. Those are things that's
what you think is going to happen on Panther Island?
Well, I'm fearful of like the corporation part of it, not the gentrification part of it.
Yeah. I mean, I think that in the engagement piece that we did, we were looking at the economic development piece, and we were talking about the potential and the positivity of all of that. And what we heard from the community over and over again was the fear of the displacement piece. Yeah. And so it would be disingenuous to even move forward with talking about the economic development and what that could look like, and the needing for the math to math and for money to be made, because all of it can't be funded by tax dollars, obviously, because we're just whittling those away more and more. So the math does have to math, but I think that the goal was to put tools in place to have there be opportunity for existing businesses, existing community members to not have what they already have culturally in the North Side taken away, reduced, negatively impacted, and also to maybe expand that to have a more authentic development on Panther Island so that it wouldn't turn into the Riverwalk. Now, I'm not saying that it can all be that. It can't. Yeah. The math won't math. You're right. Yeah. But I think that with some intentionality around it, there can be opportunities for people who want to grow businesses. One of the examples that came up was they just had a big celebration of the success and the 25 plus maybe years that La Grande Plaza has been around. Mm-hmm. And they do this whole incubation of businesses in La Grande Plaza where you can be in a smaller space, grow your business. There's a lot of support if you don't know how to do the budget part of it, if you don't know how to do the business plan part of it.
La Grande Plaza on an island sounds awesome. You know, that sounds awesome. And I think that would be but this is such an extravagant piece of real estate that I don't like. La Grande
Plaza, way bigger than that.
Yeah, like I'm just wondering, will they give it to them? Like, will they give it to the people like La Grande Plaza was given to the people? It'd probably be somewhat.
Well, I mean, La Grande Plaza is owned by an owner out of Los Angeles, California. So it's not like it was given to the people. It is for the people. I mean, there's a lot of things that happen there for the people. I think I'm not dissing that. I know some people do diss anything coming from California. I'm not one of them. But I think that it can be both. Yeah. And I'm the optimistic person. And you're going to hold everybody accountable and make sure that they actually do all the things that we...
And we're not, I mean, this will be 2042 by the time we get to really see what's happening.
I know somebody made a complaint on a post about all of this saying, this isn't going to happen for 20 years. Well, the whole thing might not be developed for 20 years, but it's going to start in pieces.
Yeah, there's ways I think it can happen. And you know what, going to your other project and the one you were just at, the Rosedale Rosedale.
Evans and Rosedale.
The kicker here is like, I'm more worried about gentrification in that one than I am in this one, because this one feels like I'm more worried about the corporations and just that people taking guard of this land and not making any real good experiences. But I see how we're trying not to. We're trying to incubate. I get the solution there. I'm more worried about this gentrification in Evans and Rosedale.
Well, you should have come to the meeting earlier.
I know. So tell me what we had.
Because the developers were there and they were presenting. And I've
Feel
been
good?
in multiple meetings with the previous developer and with neighborhood leaders and stakeholders. And coming out of that meeting, there was a whole lot more positive, amen, yes vibe about the things that were being said. It was funny because the 3 young men that are part of this development team are all very good looking. And he said something about when they came to pitch themselves for this project, because this whole thing started with a expression of interest. So they're not filling out they didn't do a request for a proposal. They did a request for an expression of interest. And that means anybody who might be interested in being considered to be the developer of this project could come and tout themselves. And when they showed up, he said that they looked at them and he was like, I think we liked more Fort Worth more than Fort Worth liked us to begin with. And he's like, they looked at us and they were kind of like, y'all are very good looking, but what else have you got for us? So I think that they have a lot of experience in various projects that they've done in other places that have contained all of the elements that people are looking for to happen here. And when they were questioned about, the challenges and what they have planned for how they're going to phase this project and maintain the site during the phases, they were very honest when they said, we already recognize that there is quite a bit of homelessness in the area, and that is something that we're going to have to contend with. And, they just answered all the questions, I think, in a really positive way. And they weren't like, we have all the answers now. They're very much saying, this is the phase we're in now. There's going to continue to be conversations with the community and opportunities for the community. And it just was, there'll probably be a story after today. So I'll go read your papers, because I think most of the reporters were there tonight.
Something to also note, it has not necessarily anything to do with that, but the Juneteenth Museum has also changed its plans by switching its location by trying to acquire
it's a tiny little
the Southside
shift.
Community Center.
It's a tiny little shift.
So when you say a tiny
Location-wise.
little shift, but the idea of reconstructing still the design is on a go. Like we're still wanting that
Build the
open
building that
space
they're
in
planning
the
to
window.
build. Yeah. No,
like
I think that they're just planning to move it down to land.
So then
that
let me
they
ask you this: does that
can
mean
attain all of it?
So then they will take down the Southside Community Center, like that will get demolished?
I would assume so.
Okay, gotcha.
I don't think there's any way to redevelop or adaptively reuse that.
A lot of people have been voting there for a while. That's all. Just wondering.
It's a pretty antiquated community center. I'm not sure anybody's going to be fighting for the adaptive reuse of that building.
So I just saw that in there as well. Since we're talking about the area,
they were all there at the meeting too.
You know what's funny too? It's like I think why I worry about gentrification there, and I don't worry about it in a bad way. I'm someone who's not actually very
gentrification is it can be improvements. What people worry about is displacement.
Yeah.
People who want to stay not being able to stay.
Yeah.
And that's something that you have to be intentional about.
Yeah. And because I look at Magnolia, right? Like Magnolia, even when I lived there, the restaurants are so different. The style of the streets are so different. So it's just what does the evolution of this area look like? And I genuinely do love the feel still of, even when I go vote in Rosedale and when I go to the restaurants around there, it's man, Southside has this aura and this feeling that if we don't hold, it's we're gonna have to describe it to people. One day, there wasn't
there'll be a plaque describing.
There wasn't this fancy barbecue spot that is
Speaking of
serving,
barbecue,
what's up?
we had barbecue at this
nice
event tonight.
Which was it? Smokeaholics?
Yes.
Smokeaholics is the best.
It was amazing.
Yeah.
It was so good.
Smokeaholics is the best.
And the developer basically said we intentionally brought them in to serve dinner tonight because we're all about partnering with the community and supporting local business. So
I was in Birmingham and I was like, man, y'all's barbecue making it happen for me.
The other thing I was going to bring up on this topic was a book that I just started listening to on my Libby app that was recommended by Congressman Mark Vesey. He shared his summer reading list, and this was one of the books on the list. It's called Fragile Neighborhoods by Seth Kaplan. And I am finding it very, very informative and helpful because it's basically talking about many of the things that we're talking about in Northside, many of the things that we're talking about in historic Southside, and the challenges and how you can't just come in as a big governmental entity with a solution, and you can't just come in as developers with a solution, and that a lot of what is required to make neighborhoods be less fragile is building community and having things for the community in the community.
I just placed my hold on it. Once you bring it back, now I'll be the one.
I have
I'm first
4
in line.
hours and 10 minutes left to listen to, so maybe I'll get that done on the plane tomorrow. And
yeah.
You can do it on your flight back.
Yeah, I'm first in line, so I'll know when to hand it to me.
And now that I've mentioned it, I'm glad you reserved it because it's probably going to be very busy.
Yeah. Cool. Well, let's go ahead and move into the big story, beautiful people, and that is land of the free for all. Fort Worth wants no rules. We have 4 topics here that we're going to cover that makes Fort Worth just feels like, you know what, we don't like accountability. We don't like.
I don't think that's what they call it. I think they call it, we don't like to be regulated.
Yes. We don't like to be regulated. We don't like to have to hear from the people or make sure that the practices that we have matter. We just want to be free and funded somehow. So anyways, number 1 on the land of the free for all is the landowners are leaving Fort Worth under 2023 state law. Property owners in Fort Worth's extraterritorial jurisdictions are increasingly petitioning to be released from city oversight. About 3,000 acres outside of city limits have been released as Fort Worth complies with the Senate Bill 2308, which went into effect September 1, 2023. The law allows property owners to be immediately released from a city's extraterritorial jurisdiction when a city extends its legal power beyond its boundaries, simply through a valid petition signed by 50% of registered voters among landowners in a contested area. We had Assistant City Manager Dana Bergdorf testify to the Texas Senate Committee on Local Government September 5th about the effects of the bill. What we can see is Fort Worth still has 169,297 acres in its extraterritorial jurisdiction after 89 acres were released earlier this year. Some developers believe Senate Bill 2308 is an overall good thing that allows them to move buildings and housing projects along faster with speed. But at the same time, it creates, it can also be seen as a good thing because now cities are not responsible of getting infrastructure and services out there. But also it could lead to, maybe unprepared circumstances with weather or situations for owners. As a planner and, person who's not a fan of sprawl, what is your overall take on it?
Yeah, I know. I have mixed feelings about it because I don't think the city of Fort Worth needs to be annexing any more of their extraterritorial jurisdiction. I think that we have grown beyond what we need to be growing geographically. We're not going to be able to service all of the things that we already have. Anything new built is just more maintenance to be done. I think that some of these people who are not wanting to be under the city's rules are going to run into the future sometime when somebody wants to do something next door to them that they don't like, and the county's not going to be able to stop them because they don't have as strict rules in the county as they have in the city. And so you might not care if there's, a junkyard or a strip club next to your house, but those are the kind of things that can happen in the county. So like I said, I have mixed feelings about it. I think that I overheard a conversation about this at a function that I was at the other night where somebody said that there is one concern is that if 50% of the owners, or even if like one owner wants to and all the ones around him don't, then he's out of luck. Yeah. So that means that the people who don't can affect people who do.
Again, this is just like this free-for-all Texas Fort Worth behavior around, oh, you know what? I don't want to be told by the city. I don't want to have to deal with city taxes. I'm just going to be basically my own little city.
It was the legislature that put this in place to allow people to have this choice because people were going to them and saying, tell that bad city to leave us alone. And the legislator, in their infinite wisdom, decided that that's what they needed to do.
And let's be clear, I think that's a way that Abbott and the political agenda wants to attack big cities. Anything to make big cities, right? Remember, Frisco can make an economic sales tax to now have a better and more budget for business acquisition and recruitment than the city of Fort Worth. And it's because there's limits on how big a city can be to have these economic sales tax, if you remember Robert Stern's interview. So there's tons of little hacks like this where they make it harder for bigger cities. But the thing that I find fascinating that we have to stop, this is the second article that said this, is by 2100, the Parker County city of Aledo, home to more than 5,800 residents, is expected to be the population center of the region. That is like...
I'm going to need a train.
Yeah. But that is, to me, just like, we have to stop saying that. And that also shows that we are not taking the North seriously enough. Dallas, Frisco, McKinney. And yeah, I just think like there's a lot of nuances here where at the end of the day, like, it's all net new, but the state is allowing people to just kind of say, we want to not be a part of a city and we're just going to live.
Well, there were legislators in the past that basically said that cities were, the creations of the state, and therefore they get to tell us exactly what to do and boss us around.
And again, I can clearly see some wins for owners, but I can see that they're not fully seeing some risk, like you said, that could come. So like we said, land for the free-for-all. You don't want to be a part of a city? You don't have to here in Tarrant County. All right, so let's go ahead to the next free-for-all. The next free-for-all is business judges. So Governor Abbott announced appointments to new Fort Worth Business Court Division. Governor Greg Abbott announced his appointees to the new 8th Business Court Division in Fort Worth, which was created last year to provide an efficient mechanism for businesses to resolve complex commercial disputes in Texas. The governor has appointed Jerry Burlard, Brian Stagner to be judges of the 8th Business Court Division, effective September 1, 2024. These people will be operating out of Fort Worth and the law school. What is the idea of having a business court division? And I think the biggest concern is they're the only the only court that doesn't get voted on. They're
not elected judges. They're appointed by the governor, and all the other judges in the state are elected. So I've heard a ton about this because my husband's a lawyer and he has strong opinions. And I got his permission to share those opinions with you all today because this is not my area of expertise, nor is it yours. But when I asked him for a 5-minute rundown on the business courts, he said that it was a solution where there was no problem. So in his opinion, it was not even something that needed to be created. It was part of an attack on the courts and judges in the last legislative session. And that attack is because that is where big business has to answer to everyday people in front of a jury of their peers. And big business doesn't like the risk of going before courts that might not be friendly to them. So these business courts, in his opinion, are going to be friendlier to big business. The business courts are the only courts in Texas where the governor appoints the judges. And like I said, every other judge in Texas is elected. And it is right now in a limited jurisdiction court, which means it only handles limited cases, and it is only in part of the state, and there are no funds allocated to run them, which is why they are using the law school for the courts. Yeah. So that's the opinion of a local attorney.
Yeah,
retired attorney.
This idea of the 7th Amendment to the United States Constitution, protect the rights to a jury trial in civil cases and limit the ability of federal judges to overturn juries' verdicts. This is to protect. This ideally it protects people getting exploited or not the proper benefits and services as labor to large companies potentially. It allows them possibly what's the take on other things that they may bypass to get things done and based off of just relationships with the governor and with, trying to get this big business here. So another free-for-all that we're seeing happening is, hey, you can be pro-business, business over everything, and we're going to even create judges that allows you to not get sued or challenged. And I picked them myself. So we are on free-for-all number 3.
We've talked about the fact that new members were elected to appraisal districts, and that was something that the legislature put in place. So all the counties now have 3 additional members making decisions. And in Tarrant County, those 3 members that were elected were backed by Judge O'Hare. And they went into this saying, when we get elected, we are going to put a cap on taxes being raised over 5%, and we're going to only do appraisals every 3 years instead of every year. They got a little bit of pushback by some of the people that were already on the appraisal board, and they said, no, we should do it every 2 years. So that's what they did. But what this article is speaking to is that now that Tarrant County has done this, they have become kind of a blueprint for property tax changes across other counties. So other counties are looking to do the same thing. And in one of the counties, and some of the lawmakers that came up with this, adding the 3 additional people, are starting to be like, oops, maybe there were some unintended consequences here. And they believe that some of these actions that they have taken are not legal. So Betancourt was the architect behind the constitutional amendment that reshaped the way that tax districts are governed in Texas. The amendment, approved in November, gave residents the power to elect some additional appraisal district board members for the first time in history. And like I said, some of those folks came in with some ideas of change that they wanted to make. Now that these lawmakers are concerned about the legality of the Tarrant Appraisal District's subsequent shift in direction, which includes major changes to its reappraisal plan. And these are the changes that have been alarming to school districts and various other folks that get their funding from these taxes, because it's going to have a significant impact on those. The other county that has kind of followed Tarrant County's direction, so both Bexar County and Johnson County have also entered into looking at this. And I think it was Johnson County that already had some members on the board that were kind of leaning in the direction of doing these things. And then when their 3 new people came on, they were able to pass without any pushback. I think they went to every 3 years, which is also problematic, because then various counties are doing it at different times. I don't know if that's a problem or not, but it just seems like it makes county government even more convoluted and not working as well as it should, as Bud Kennedy suggested.
Yeah, someone said here in the article, in a changing real estate market, if you're not appraising every year, you're not going to be at market value. And ultimately, that could have an impact on state funding for the local school districts.
So
basically, another land for the free. Hey, you can have all the services and not pay, the property value of your house.
you're not going to have all the services. That's what I'm telling you.
I know we're going to,
the cities and the counties are going to have to cut back.
Yeah, and it's going to bite us in the butt.
Everybody forgets. You need to think about that. I don't want people to be taxed out of their homes. I understand people's concerns with rising taxes. But when the state passes legislation that says you can never even consider an income tax in Texas, and then starts whittling away at the ability to collect property tax, I think that the reason behind this is that they just want government to shrink. They want to lessen everything that the government does.
Land for the free-for-all.
Exactly.
And that's why
that's why they're doing it. And I don't agree with it, because I think there are certain things that the government should be providing.
So here we go. The last one, and this one goes back to, you brought it up earlier. This is about Fort Worth's leaders overturning the ban on discriminatory events at city-owned facilities. After a string of controversial events earlier this year, which you brought up, the one talking about LGBTQ, there was also the one by the Texas True Project talking about people are trying to end the white race. They were doing that at the Botanical Gardens. The new policies overturns the city's previous ban on discriminatory events held on city property. Moving forward, the city may not adopt regulations pertaining to a speaker's viewpoint for the content of the event. Assistant City Manager Jessica McEachern wrote in September 23rd email to city council members attained by the report. The city has classified community center and library meeting rooms as designated public forums, barring them from content-based restrictions according to the email. With the new designation, regulations on renting the spaces will be limited to an event's time, place, and manner. McEachern, who oversees the Park and Recreation Department, said the city's ultimately decided that supporting the First Amendment rights of everyone was the right way to handle the situation. This has led to endorsements by the mayor, by a couple of the council members. So again, a land for the free. If you want to have an event about how QAnon rules, let it ride. Come on in. We make it happen. so it's getting ridiculous.
When we talk through this and this whole thing about like freedom of speech, you have the right to say what you want to say. And so they cannot regulate your speech. So if you want to rent a room at the library or a community center and bring together a bunch of people to talk about whatever you want to talk about, you have the right to do that. Now, where I think it's going to get a little bit problematic is that they go on to talk about how some of these things might be controversial. And so if somebody makes a reservation, under the new process for renting city facilities, staff will notify the Fort Worth Police Department if an event reservation application, quote, indicates the potential for concern and or includes alcohol. I guess that would be a really bad combination. Yeah. A spicy topic and alcohol is being served. Yeah. So according to the email, then the police department would review the event information and monitor, quote, online chatter. Either a facilities manager, the Parks and Recreation Department director, or the assistant director would decide whether to escalate an event reservation application to the police department. But if warranted, the police department would determine how many off-duty officers and the event holder would be required to have on site, and the event holder would be responsible for paying the cost to contract them. And if the police department determined that off-duty officers are required outside of the facility as well, the city will cover the cost as part of normal operations. So I know there's a budget in the police department for events in the city. And my hope is that we don't just get bombarded with a bunch of crazy people wanting to have events that are problematic that are then going to require us to have a bigger budget for the police. And then I wouldn't necessarily want to be the person that had to make the call about whether this needs to be escalated to the police department.
So a great example here is if this says the dangers of transgenderism was an event that they had. And if the off-duty cops were needed for that, we would use city tax dollars to do so.
Yeah.
This is what's just not making sense. You know, it's just, I understand the freedom of speech, and I know it's a fine line between freedom of speech, but then also but what's dangerous, right? You can't, if it's starting to feel like harm, right? The dangers of transgenderism doesn't sound like it's an event to get rid of transgender people. The war on white America, like that's another one. The case for Christian nationalism. I mean, arguably, like Christian nationalism wants no other religion. So that is kind of dangerous. But like, so it's like, who is to decide what's dangerous and hate speech compared to actually could be turned into like a group coming together to just have to do something hateful or harmful?
Or talk about what they hate.
Yeah. That thing now gets them connected with other people who hate the same thing.
Well, I mean, we have this situation right now where people are talking about things that they say are happening in Springfield. Is that the name of the place?
Yep.
And that is causing people who are unhinged, in my opinion, to attack and, call and threaten a population that are legally existing in that space.
Yeah, the state of Ohio has had to use their forces to protect kids going to school because of the threats that these Haitian kids are having on going to school in Springfield.
Based on nonsense that people are speaking, which...
And they knew it was
like
nonsense.
we said, it is, they're free to say things. People could say the world is flat. People can say things that are not true, and we can't stop them. And so here we're going to, and I don't know what the answer is. I'm not saying that I think we should not follow freedom of speech, but I just hope we don't become a hotbed for all the people who want to come and talk nonsense.
Yeah. Well, those are your big stories that we connected. We did not want this to be so depressing as it is. So we apologize. We did have some very, inspiring. Actually, we haven't had an inspiring one in a while. Maybe we'll give you an inspiring one soon. We'll come back from California, get a bunch of good ideas. Maybe we'll just feel refreshed being with family and feel more jolly about the things that are happening in the city. So we're going to move into wins and losses. Every week we give you a win and we give you a loss. So we'll start with losses. My loss goes to, obviously we're free and it's okay, and we should allow Tucker Carlson to talk to Fort Worth audiences. But, my loss is that that the things that Tucker Carlson talks about, let's be clear that, and I'm someone who's really pro comedians to be able to be a little bit grungier. Like, I don't get upset about comedians. Like, comedians really are like the last people who can have a little bit of humor and fun. But, Dallas native Alex Stein warmed up the crowd with jokes about Haitian migrants keeping Chinese buffets in business due to cats being on the menu. And how he gets excited to see the pilot of his plane he's about to board is black, because that means you can smoke weed on the flight. So my loss is just like the fact that people pay money to go hear these kind of things. Kyle Rittenhouse was there. Beau French was there. So whatever you got, it just talks to me about like this idea that who's winning the war of extremism. Extremism just rented out Dickies Arena. Don't know what to say to you guys. Alrighty. What's your loss, Ann?
So my loss is way more mild than that. And it's not the one that I discussed with you earlier, because I came up with something else. And it's a loss that I'm going to turn into a win. So earlier today, the folks at Near Southside posted on their social media that the forestry department has evaluated trees along Magnolia and found some of them to be declining and or dead and getting to a point where they could become dangerous to pedestrians. So they're going to have to remove some trees along Magnolia. And I love trees, and there's been such intentionality and effort put into having a tree-lined walkable street there. And some of these trees have been there for a really long time. Like, you look at the caliper of these trees and they are way bigger than trees that we normally see in streetscapes. But I understand the need for them to be removed. And I'm really proud of the folks at Near Southside for communicating this, because it is literally describing what is needing to happen and the plan for replacing them, because they understand the importance of the tree canopy. I wish everybody in Fort Worth understood the importance of it. I think all of our development should have the requirements that are required, but it seems like we're going in the opposite direction with less requirements in the city. But I think that the loss of those trees is my loss this week, but I'm glad we have a plan.
Yeah. Next they're going to allow you to just, if you want to chop down a tree and use it for firewood, have at it. Just go ahead and do so.
You can on your single family lot.
Look at that. So I do now have, you brought up another win for me by talking about Magnolia. So we're now moving into wins. My first win is, I said about a month ago, Leon's new album was coming out. It was just, I got all excited, and then I saw that it was just a single. It was Laredo, which is a great song, but Leon's album is for sure coming out October 4th. And so I'm excited because I'm going to Big Bend. I'm going to San Francisco, then I'm going to Big Bend, driving, listening to Leon Bridges. That's just going to be a win-win. So that's my one win, but my other one is Lost in Sound. I attended Lost in Sound, and it was a great time.
And there's another one in October.
I went to multiple venues, and that was super cool. I had a epic vibe. We had someone in town. I went with some friends and someone there who's never been to Texas. And one of my rules is, if you're someone who's never been to Texas and I find out and we're hanging out together, I buy the rest of the night. I don't let you buy anything, because I want you to be like Texas people, and Texas is cool because we ain't got nothing else to give you. So at least I could give you a free meal. You know what I'm saying? And some drinks. So that's my effort to keep Fort Worth cool. But Lost in Sound, thank you for also keeping Fort Worth cool.
Yep. I went myself, but did not stay out till the wee hours like you did. I did all of my Lost in Sound stuff in the daytime and through dinner. We had dinner at Bearded Lady and listened to some great music outside on their patio. So,
I was eating tacos at like 1 a.m. at Down and Out, Kept me alive.
So my win is that 6 Texas art organizations received inaugural NEA Art Here grants, and one of them is right here in Fort Worth. It is the Wellman Project, a creative reuse organization that provides free resources for educators. Receiving the Arts Here grant is transformative for our community. It will empower us to build the needed infrastructure for a makerspace and a tool library that provides equitable access to creative resources, a first in Fort Worth, and hopefully not the last. It would be fantastic after the Steer Fort Worth State of the Arts panel that I spoke on last week and watched a bunch of other panels talking about what might be to come in future library spaces. I think that would be something that we could replicate, those kind of spaces in libraries across the community, and have those community resources in more neighborhoods throughout the city.
Yeah. The founders and leadership of Wellman are some of my favorite people, and I maybe have said 10 words to them, but the vibe and the energy and just how they are around the community, it's just
They're the best.
Yeah, the type of stewards you want of society. It kind of reminds me of the guy at Taste. I mean, just the same kind of energy, just great people. You know, I don't think we would need a business appointed judges if, you know, these are the models of entrepreneurs that we need to be hosting up in Fort Worth. They're right here, local people that are doing great, honest work with good souls and trying to create social impact-based things. You know, meanwhile, we're trying to be the main front up to Abbott's Texas Stock Exchange and, you know, taking away legalization at Delaware so we can have more corporations. We're getting obsessed with Abbott's Texas business agenda when we have our own right here with great examples like Wellman. All right, beautiful people. That was the 817 pod for you. It's been a long time since we gave you articles. But we'll be back again. We'll be doing another Wednesday because, like I said, I'm headed to Big Bend. So we're going to do this on Wednesday again. We'll give you some articles again and make that happen.
All right. So hopefully we both have safe travels and great trips, and we'll be back next week.
Now they control your life, control your life.